This lesson is to get hands-on experience with the string manipulation. Let's assume that we would like to write a function that takes a string and an integer number, n, as input arguments and returns the number of n-letter words in that string. Here I'm opening the Python IDLE and a blank text editor. As usual, save it under a name. I'm going to call it find n-letter words. Now I'm going to start writing my function. I start with a comment on the top of my program or function in order to remember what was the intention of writing this function. The comment is this function finds the number of n-letter words in the input string. Let's call the function find n-letter words, and I know that I have a single input. Next, I'm going to use a method called split. The split function splits a string into a list by separating the components of a list using a delimiter. In this case, the delimiter is the space. That means every time the split function sees a space, it will split the string and creates an element of a list. In a moment, you will see what it does. Next, I'm going to initialize the number of n-letter words to 0, preparing my function to count the number of n-letter words. Then I will go through each word in my words. Remember that words is a list of words in my input string. And then if the length of the word is equal to, let's say, 3, then I will add 1 to the number of words, and then eventually I return the number of n-letter words. A good practice in developing any kind of function is to develop it incrementally. That means whatever you want to do, assume some of the parameters which are given to the function are a constant, and then slowly add more parameters to your function. Now in this case, I just want to develop a function which only counts the number of 3-letter words. Later on, after I'm sure that the function works properly, then I change that 3 to a variable which I can control. Now let's write the main program to test this function. Let's have a test string, for example, he who would learn to fly one day. Now I am going to call my function and print the result that my function returns. When I run my function, you see that 4 will be printed. The reason that the 4 is printed is because in my function I am counting the number of 3-letter words, and if you look at my test string, you see that there are 4 3-letter words, being who, fly, one, and day. Let me show you some details about what is happening inside the function and how the split works. To do that, let me add a print statement so you see what is happening. If I run my function, you see that the split function has split the input string into individual words. So the words which now is a list is he would be one element, who would be the next element, would, learn, to, fly, one, day. Make sure you understand that now I have a list with 8 elements. Each element is a string by itself. Now let me add another print statement inside my for loop. As you can see, each time that this for loop goes through, this print will print the word which is currently I'm working on. I want to make sure that you understand the variable words is a list with 8 elements. And this for loop, each time that it goes through, it uses a variable word that the word itself each time would be one string. So when I print this, the first time that I go through, the result would be he. The next time that it goes through, the result would be who. The next time that it goes through, the result would be would, and so on. The first print here, which is this list, comes from this print statement. These 8 prints here are coming from the print statement which is inside the for loop, and the last number, this 4 over here, comes from this printf statement, which is after the function has returned the number of 3-letter words. Next, let me remove this extra printf statements, and now rather than asking if the length of a word is equal to 3, now I'm asking if the length of a word is equal to n. That basically means now I can call my function with any number of letters that I want. Remember that my function this time requires 2 inputs, one of them being the input string and the other one being the number of characters in a word that I'd like to have. In this case, I'm going to call my function with 3 to make sure that everything is exactly the way it was. Now if I change this to 4, for example, you see that my function returns 0. The reason is there are no 4-letter words in my input string. If I change this to 2, it returns 2. That basically means there are 2 2-letter words in my input string, one of them being he and the other one being 2. Now if I change it to 5, the answer is again 2. That means there are 2 5-letter words in my string. One of them is wood, the other one is learn. Let's have some fun and modify the program such that when it returns the number of words, I am going to put it in a variable called x and then print the x. Rather than passing a constant to my function, I'm going to set the number of characters in a word to a variable k and then pass that variable to my function. Let's make our print statement a little more descriptive. When I run my program this time, it says there are 0 words with 4 characters. Now if I run it with 5, you see that there are 2 words with 5 characters and so on. And rather than keeping k as a constant, let's put it in a for loop so it can change. So I'm going to set the k such that it runs from 1 to 10 and then run my function inside the for loop and each time print the result. This time if I run my program, it will tell me all the statistics about my string. So it says there are 0 words with 1 character, there are 2 words with 2 characters, there are 4 words with 3 characters, and so on. Let's count the total number of words in my input string. So I'm going to add a variable called total words, and each time I'm going to add the number of words to that, and once the for loop is finished, I'm going to print the total number of words. This time when I run my program, you see that in addition to giving me statistics about the number of words in the input string, it can also tell me how many words are there. I just forgot to put the word, so rather than saying there are a total of 8 words in this string, it just says there are a total of 8 in this string. So let me correct that and then run my program again, and you see that now it says there are a total of 8 words in this string. The fact that last string is warped into the second line is because my IDLE does not have enough space. Now to correct that, all I have to do is make it a little larger, and you can see that it automatically corrects itself. So what did you learn? You learned how to write a function to split a string into a list and how to find the number of n-letter words in a string.